Thanks for flying with us. We are interested to hear from you. You can reach us at starlordspodcast@gmail.com. Let us know your thoughts, comments, or corrections. If you enjoyed the show, please leave us a 5-star rating, review, and subscribe. You can also help us out through our Patreon at the Star Lords Podcast. Find us on Instagram, the Star Lords Podcast, on Facebook at the Star Lords Podcast, on Twitter at the Star Lords Podcast, and on YouTube, Star Lords Podcast. We'll catch you next time.
You are listening to the Star Lords Podcast.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
Are you stuck-up, half-witted, scruffy-looking nerf herder?
But I was going into Toshi Station to pick up some power converters.
Welcome aboard the Millennial Falcon. We're in the Mustafar system. Is that a system or?
Yeah, it's a system.
Usually they're
Sidious
not.
says it's the Mustafar
Okay,
system.
good.
Yeah, like you said, they're not creative.
They're
enough,
usually
so
not creative with system names. It's usually just the name of whatever planet they're also going to.
Not the star, like the soul system where we currently reside. Not currently,
like
because
New
we're in
York,
Mustafar.
New York.
But
Mustafar.
I want to see the Star Wars addresses.
Do they have like a postal code or PO boxes? How do you send mail?
I know Emperor Palpatine. I think not while he was Emperor, while he was Senator Palpatine, did have a regular sort of street address that is named at some
Yes.
point. It's like
The Imperial Palace.
no, his apartment at like 9 Republic Avenue or something like that.
I think it's like the tradition of like having the head of state's like address, like in Canada.
Right.
What is it? Rideau Hall is for
No.
the Governor General, right?
I can't remember
But yeah, it's a
the one in Ottawa. Yeah,
yeah, like people use it in the media, right? And then like you obviously have the White House and like
It was something Pennsylvania Ave or whatever.
yeah, so
Pennsylvania sounds right.
prominent.
So we're here in Mustafar because we're reviewing some history from a long time ago. And that history is General Grievous, the graphic novel. This was written by Charles Dixon, penciled by Rick Leonardi, inked by Mark Pennington, colorists Dan Jackson, Lucas Marangon, Michelle Madsen, letterer Dave Lanfear, cover artist Paolo Parente. Just wanted to get that in there. Feel like,
Credit where credit is due.
credit where credit's due. It was a nice thing. You see the names of all the people who are involved in the movies and everything, and all the cool actors and those writers. They all get talked about. But who talks about the comic book writers? And they're really sort of the bread and butter of Star Wars is the comic books.
Next time
Also-
we do a movie review, we're gonna read the entire credits.
Yes. Only the grips and the gaffers. That's who we're shining the spotlight on.
Also-
Episode 999, all about grips. Okay.
Also, spoiler alert. In
Yes.
case you want to read this, I'm guessing we'll have spoilers.
Yes. Yeah. There'll be spoilers. I don't think the ending was terribly. It doesn't really do anything to Star Wars lore overall.
No, but I mean within the comic.
But
right?
yeah,
if you
within the
care
comic,
about how it
yeah.
ends.
And I would actually recommend reading it. It's not the greatest comic, but it looks pretty. And if you're a fan of General Grievous, I also think you'll really like it. We finally really get to see him strut his stuff. We see it a fair bit in the Clone Wars TV show, but this comic book is a spotlight on Grievous as the villain. It's like, what if Grievous was your Darth Vader sort of main card, main event bad guy?
Yeah, and in a lot of ways, Grievous was sort of a precursor to Vader, especially like with the
Cybernetics,
cyborg
yeah.
aspect to him.
Yeah.
It seems like this was Palpatine's sort of trial run before Vader.
And in Palpatine's own words, he does indeed confirm that in one of the many books he authored, that he was experimenting with Grievous, essentially. And they actually use the biomedical data that the whatever
gathered, yeah.
the Confederacy gathered while doing Grievous's setup. Do we want to talk a little bit about his injuries and what happened to him?
Yeah. So he was a Kalish warlord initially. So it's a warrior species. I believe we did talk about them in one of our religious.
I think we may have even talked about Grievous a little bit in Cyborgs.
Yeah. So he was already a prominent alien warlord who was injured.
But only sort of at the planetary level, right?
Yeah. He wasn't intergalactic, no.
Or he wasn't a bounty hunter or
no.
mercenary.
Yeah, he definitely was on his home planet for the most part. But he was recruited by the CIS, the Confederacy of Independent Systems, where he was in the shuttle that crashed. Now, rumor has it that the shuttle crash was not an accident, and it was actually intentional because the entire recruitment strategy was to perform these experiments on and turning Grievous into a cyborg.
That seems so hard to plan your shuttle explosion.
just enough to maim you, but not enough to kill you.
Yeah, just enough to take out your entire lower body.
Yeah,
both your arms.
Right. It's hard to say how it doesn't specify how grievous his injuries were. So like it could have been like he wasn't that bad, but while he's like in an induced coma, they're like, oh yeah, we just removed your limbs while we were digging around in you, right? And did all
you do get the sense, given his chronic emphysema, that a lot of damage was done to him, right?
So that actually comes up later.
Right.
He doesn't start coughing until after
really?
Quite close to the end of the Clone Wars.
I just assumed it was like a smoke inhalation injury or something.
No, he
this is good stuff.
He develops that cough in Gennady Tarkovsky's Clone Wars. I believe it's Mace Windu force crushes his chest.
Oh, interesting.
As he's escaping with the Chancellor. Like, this is right before Episode 3 starts. So it's like,
no wonder he hates the Jedi.
No, he's had a vendetta against the Jedi for a while. But yeah, and then this comic book takes place like in the midst of the Clone Wars. So this is Grievous's like background and history, and then now we're, the Clone Wars have been going on for a little bit. It's still pretty early. The Clone Troopers are wearing Phase 1 Clone Trooper armor still.
Yeah, I was going to ask like where, because the it's 3 years, right? Is that how long the Clone Wars are?
I want to say 6, but I could be wrong. It could be as short as 3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, I was going to say I'm not really sure where in the Clone Wars chronology this.
Yeah, it'll
this
be
one
on
fits in.
the earlier side because, like I said, they're still wearing Phase 1 Clone Trooper armor in the comics. And just a quick point of clarity too, Marvel just recently released their own Grievous comic book.
Oh, interesting.
So for the record, we're talking about the Dark Horse release.
Oh, we're gonna have to.
and I have a little bit of compare and contrast because I actually read the Marvel one right
you?
after I read this one because
okay.
I just wanted to see kind of how they changed things. So we'll talk a little bit about that at the end here. But let's dive into the comic.
So we get a staff meeting in the Jedi Council chambers, and what they're talking about. Grievous, this guy who's killing all these Jedi. As one Jedi puts it, he was relentless in his pursuit and personally killed countless troopers and Jedi. That's actually not from a person, that's from a text box. But another real person said that he has murdered hundreds of our brothers and sisters. So I just want to put that into context that this was just early in the Clone Wars.
Yeah, he's already killed hundreds.
He's already killed hundreds of Jedi.
Yeah.
And keep in mind, there are only 10,000 Jedi in the galaxy at this point.
Yeah, so, and I mean how hard it is to kill a Jedi to begin with. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, this also kind of sets up just like it probably gets lost a little bit in the films, but how big of a player Grievous actually is in the war. So this sort of helps put him in a
perspective.
The whole graphic novel helps put him more into a context of like who he actually is and
how menacing and how well known across the galaxy.
Yeah, I mean, he's really probably the most feared figure at the time.
Yeah,
you know?
Like he is the Darth Vader of his era because people don't know about Sidious.
Yeah,
people don't know really about Maul. People don't know,
Yeah.
So like
because all the even Dooku, they're all kind of operating in the shadows, right?
Yeah, Dooku I think would also be more known as a political figure than a frontline menace. He's not leading,
but is he known as like the Sith Lord?
No, I don't think so.
No, he's very much He's actually the public face of the Confederacy
right, exactly.
right now.
And he's probably like good for PR and stuff. They don't see him as like this menacing warlord.
Yeah.
But General Grievous, on the other hand, is
Right.
like the hammer, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Very much so. So the Jedi are sort of debating what to do about the Grievous situation. There's one, he was a Padawan, right? Sort of our protagonist character.
Yeah.
And his master was killed. Do you remember what his name was? I can't remember.
It was kind of hard
Star Wars
to
names
remember.
are
Yeah,
always difficult. I forget the protagonist.
Jordan, if you want to look it up there.
Yeah. I don't have
He's
it.
not. This is his only intro. Like we don't know this character from
Yeah.
anything else.
But we just know his master's been killed.
Oh,
recently.
Flynn Kaibo.
Flynn Kaibo.
Yeah.
So he's making the pitch to the council, basically, that they need to do something about this Grievous situation. And the council doesn't like it because they're not fans of assassination. Yoda makes a big point about how they shouldn't be assassinating people. That's not something
Jedi do.
the Jedi do. But then on the flip side, you're sort of already involved in a war. And then,
Our generals in that war,
yeah.
doing a lot of things Jedi shouldn't do.
Precisely. And then also there's this other conversation they have about what it would take to get rid of, this is later on in the comic, what it would take to get rid of Grievous. And they basically look at him as he's a unit in military terms, right? He's just one man.
Yeah.
But they have to look at him as though he's like an entire army. They're basically saying we'd
The
have to
resources. That,
we'd have to send an entire army just to kill this
Yeah.
one guy, right?
Yeah.
So
and
is that more worse?
it's
Especially
more like a cost benefit analysis. They're like, right now, it's not really worth it for us to do like a full frontal assault on Grievous because of how many resources we'd have to divert in order to take him out.
And so then this Padawan is like, well, you could assassinate him, and the Jedi Council doesn't go for it.
No, not very good Machiavellian politicians.
No.
Counselors.
No, they need to learn from Emperor Palpatine. So then our Padawan gets a new master. Her name is Zamir Bothu. She has like a red-colored breast cancer ribbon tattooed on her face or something. I don't know what that marking is all about.
I have to look her up. I believe, just from looking at her, I believe she was a Mariluka, kind of like Luminara, Undili, and...
Was she blind, though? All Miraluka are blind.
Oh, I'm thinking of the wrong race.
Yeah.
But anyways, Luminara and Undili's race, and they typically have face tattoos, but I don't know if that's actually what species she is. They're like an off-brand human.
Diet human. Human zero. So she's our Padawan's new instructor. Her first lesson for him is silent contemplation. And then we get the idea that she's just sort of forcing him to meditate for an extremely long period of time. Although we never really know how long exactly. It would be interesting to know if it was like a predefined Jedi ritual that she was like forcing him to go through, and you have to like be under trance for 20 hours or whatever, or if you're going just for however long it takes for you to get into that state, right? Because accessing sort of an altered state of consciousness can take a different amount of time, sort of depending on what you're doing. But the idea was to get into a trance state, I think, based on what we get. So just a little bit of trivia on trance states from Wikipedia. A trance is an abnormal state of wakefulness in which a person is not self-aware, is either altogether unresponsive to external stimuli, but nevertheless capable of pursuing and realizing an aim, or is selectively responsive in following directions of the person, if any, who has induced the trance. We don't really know if that's what the Jedi are going to make themselves, pliable, brainwashed little servants, or if that's what she was going for. Maybe she just wanted to control his brain or something.
I think that's very
Just torturing him. And then we get introduced to another character who's they sort of decide, the new Padawan and his other friends, that we're going to go against the Master's wishes, and
We're going to pull an assassination mission.
we're going to try to pull an assassination
We're going to go
mission.
CIA.
Exactly.
Just a side note, I just looked up Zamir. She's just a human.
Oh, just a
She
human
just likes her face tats.
with a face tat.
Yeah.
Did you find information on, is it a face tattoo or is it
Yeah.
paint? It's a face
It's a
tattoo?
tattoo.
Man.
Could just be like her culture from whatever planet
Yeah,
she's
because humans could have any kind of
Yeah.
culture in space, right?
But just to put a finer point on the face tattoo, now I want to return to that because this is a sizable tattoo.
Hold on, they describe it as a marking. To be fair, so
okay,
a marking could be a tattaoo, could be a paint job, could be makeup.
Fair. I'm just saying there'd be a lot of swelling in that tattoo if that was a real, because it covers like
most of her face.
Yeah, I'd say at least 50% of the surface area of her face, and mostly in the middle of her face, including her eyelids.
Yeah,
so it would.
I mean, you also don't know how future tattoo technology works either.
That's true. Maybe you can just like
get it lasered on.
Yeah, maybe you can just like dye your skin
permanently,
really easily.
Just dip it in a liquid. We'll have to do an episode on space tattoos.
Absolutely.
There's enough there. Zabrak's.
So one of the guys who's convinced to go with this sort of A-team special infiltration mission is Bedard Tone. So right away, he's kind of a tragic character. He's a cyborg, like many such veterans of the Clone Wars. He's got a bunch of prosthetics. Kind of looks like Cyborg from Teen Titans.
Yeah, like half his face is metal.
He even has that like it's almost like the same plate. I think it's really not very creative, unfortunately. Although to be fair, that sort of half skull faceplate thing on cyborgs, I think just sort of pops up as like a
trope.
In a lot of science fiction cyborg media. But you kind of know that based on this is a General Grievous thing, what they're doing, he's already sort of been scarred by this, that things aren't going to go well for Bedard Tone in the end. So would it be better to kill a cyborg who is more than half cyborg than a cyborg who is just under half cyborg? You know what I'm saying? Where's the line? So killing Grievous, so he's in like a certain sense, should I say this? It's like killing a third of a person or whatever, because he's only got his lungs and his brain.
I think if your consciousness is still intact,
and his eyeball,
you're still killing a person.
And it's still the same as killing.
Yes.
But then what about this? Because what about
is a double leg amputee less of a person?
Yes.
No.
No. And Warhammer 40K, so you've got like automatons that kind of just use human substrates almost of shells, right?
Okay, yeah. If you're looking at it in like the sci-fi,
and so where's the fuzzy gray area part of that, where you go from being
a biological robot
to just being an animal cell substrate for an artificial intelligence? And then with Grievous, we actually do know that he also has a bunch of neural implants as well. So to what degree is Grievous more like just another of the Confederacy's battle droids, right? And in that context, maybe the Council's wrong that it wouldn't actually be morally unethical. Although, I don't know, maybe even if he was fully robotic, they would still feel the same.
Yeah. I don't think they would feel the same if he was fully robotic. And another interesting point that just kind of popped into my head is the Council effectively does... I guess it's not really an assassination mission, but when they send Obi-Wan to take out Grievous, and in the end, they end up doing it anyway.
Not the most consistent.
Yeah, but he did take a whole, battalion of clone troopers with him to help deal with it. But I don't think it's necessarily an assassination mission, because Obi-Wan could have just taken Grievous out and then just disappeared, right? He had the drop on Grievous and still made himself known, still engaged in a full open battle, which is what the Council was avoiding initially anyways, because it was going to take too many resources. But, after years of conflict, they're probably like, okay.
Well, one Jedi isn't that many resources, though.
He did take a lot of clone troopers with him, though.
Oh, right, yeah.
So, but anyway, sorry, that's kind of an aside there. I was just thinking Obi-Wan does end up doing the dirty work anyway. That menace to the galaxy.
Yeah. I really can't imagine that this is like the only time the Jedi Council has ever been asked to assassinate somebody. I feel like in their long history before this, I'm sure they've ordered a few.
Well, they do bring up an interesting ethical dilemma. Even this Padawan was that like they're trying to do, like you said, a cost-benefit analysis, and they're like, Grievous has the potential to kill so many people. If this conflict is allowed to drag out, if we send a small team to assassinate him, we could mitigate the total loss of life, right? Even though if we dirty our hands. So it's an interesting calculation, which I actually recently, just to tie it into real life, was listening to a political podcast about CIA assassination missions and like kind of the analysis of like, is it better to go to war, apply political pressure that's nonviolent, and ultimately assassination is just like a political tool.
Yeah.
So it is an interesting conundrum that he does bring forward to the council, but the council has very much made their moral decision, regardless if it may cost more lives in the long run, of continuing the war than just to run the assassination.
I think there's also just the consideration of allowing like the dark side to sort of seep in by using these sort of tactics.
Yeah,
right?
and Yoda even throws that in the Padawan's face, and
Yeah.
like he's acting out of vengeance because this Grievous just killed his master.
Yeah.
In pain, right? He's in
So,
emotional turmoil.
So just to try and read Yoda's mind here, I could see him maybe thinking that that's the greater risk, is that like a dark side agent infiltrates the Jedi Order, by allowing them to carry out this action. They go down a path of the dark side.
And there are quite a few Jedi that do end up following the dark side because of the Clone Wars. That they see what they're doing, they kind of move away from the Jedi teachings, and they get put in place like in awkward moral conundrums where they can't.
I think there is something about the dark side seems to proliferate more like when under secrecy, and when there's just maybe less accountability, less openness, it seems to be a much bigger opportunity for the dark side to kind of grow.
Yeah.
And that is sort of how Darth Bane designed the Order of Sith Lords, right? It was specifically with that idea of the more open and out you are with the power and the networks, like sort of it diminishes your power with every person who shares
In
your
that.
power, right?
Yeah.
And
Exactly,
so
yeah.
by just having the rule of two and keeping it secret, like you said, the dark side has the most power that way by being secretive and just contained.
Occult, even.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Literally. So then we get our first shot of Grievous busting onto some Mon Calamari spaceship. I'll read a quote from our main man, the general. "This ship stinks of fish."
That's
or
racist.
so I would imagine. The Mon Calamari are such a disgusting species. Please tell me they are all slain. It's not really how Grievous sounds, but just in case you were wondering, Grievous
is a space racist.
yeah, and he's not very nice. I can't imagine like if you just did the
I wonder if
the cultural math on this racially motivated hate speech to try to pour it over to human Terran terms, what you would turn this into, but it would be very offensive. Like this is a really terrible thing to say about people.
Grievous definitely would have been banned from YouTube.
Yeah, he's banned from the HoloNet.
Deplatformed.
Yeah, absolutely. And then on that spaceship, I think, or somewhere around there anyway, I just saw an Abyssinian. Abyssinians are, I just wanted to talk about Abyssinians, basically. They're just those one-eyed aliens. There's an Abyssinian Jedi Master somewhere here
Yeah,
in
they're like
Grievous.
cyclopes.
They're Cyclops or Monarchs, according to Wikipedia.
They can't just go with the normal terminology.
Monarchs. It makes more sense when you think about it.
Yeah, it
Mono
does.
meaning one,
Yeah.
I guess. I don't know. I don't know where Cyclops comes from, though. So
Maybe it's more than just one eye. Maybe they only have like one lung and one other things, single mono things.
quit spoiling the rest of my story, because that is indeed where this is going.
Oh, really? Oh, sorry.
Side note.
I didn't even.
Abyssinia is also the ancient Ethiopian empire too. But
Yes, it is.
unrelated to these species.
It's also a species of
Cat.
monkey.
Oh, really?
There's a monkey called an Abyssinian. They're kind of rare. They have really long, like black fur.
Oh, really?
That's kind of like skunk patterned. Abyssinian monkeys.
And there's Abyssinian cats, but these aliens have no relation to any of those human.
They're green. They're big. They have 3 fingers.
Yeah.
And one large eye. Think like Leela from Futurama.
Yeah.
They're also a great Chalmun's Cantina cut because they're from that infamous scene in episode 4. There's an Abyssinian somewhere in Chalmun's Cantina for like 2 frames. And they were used a whole bunch in the Archie Goodwin Marvel line of comics, but like they're not really main title characters or anything. Nobody really does anything great about any Abyssinian characters. There's a couple mentions here, but they're just a fun part of the Star Wars fabric. Abyssin body cells were replaced every 80 hours, and organs which typically were paired in other species appeared singularly in the Abyssin body. Because of their regenerative abilities, Abyssin could live up to 300 standard years. And they also had a very violent culture, which there may have been sort of an interaction between evolutionary pressures on their planet and fighting, because that's what sentientologists sort of think, that there's a feedback mechanism somewhere in their violence. Either the violence is making them regenerate more, or violence was such a good strategy because of their regenerative capabilities. One of those is going on there. So they have a culture that's sort of based on duels and blood feuds and fighting and growing your limbs back.
Not unlike the Kalish either.
Yeah, they're
I don't know if that's an intentional mirroring of cultures or.
Are the Kalish like green or gray-green?
No, they're like reddish.
Oh, are they? Okay,
Yeah,
I was way off. So blooding in Abyssinian culture was a brawl which ended only when one tribe's warriors were all killed, captured, or incapacitated. Warriors who survived blooding were usually allowed to join the winning tribe once they finished their regeneration. So I imagine just like the Black Knight from Monty Python kind of situation, when you're tied up on the outskirts of town, fed dog meat or something to grow your arms and legs back. This tradition led to some violent incidents when spacers tried to trade with Abyssin tribes with scarce water resources, especially since the Abyssin assumed the alien traders could regenerate as quickly as they did. So I thought that was funny. That's just some lore about our Abyssin friends. They also have their own language and hieroglyphs, which is interesting.
Are they all worked out too? Like it's illegible?
I don't know about the hieroglyphs. I think there's like one artifact that's referenced in one comic book or something that has Abyssin writing. And the language is all barks and whatnot. Anyway, so the main plot back to the Mustafar system. After that little diversion with our monkeys and our monarchs, we get the main plot of the General Grievous graphic novel, which is basically what were we saying? Cutting edge technology for the podcast. This is now a tech show, so I know a lot of listeners. I know you guys are parents, and you're looking at what's the future going to look like,
especially for my kids.
How are you going to give your kids an edge in this scary techno future world? Well, I think General Grievous may have the answer for you.
Perfect.
So his solution is kidnapping a bunch of Jedi younglings and turning them into small
Cyborgs.
Grievouses. And they do intend, like, not just to graft their whole bodies into like a mech, but do what Grievous has. So Grievous is only a couple of organs: his lungs, his brain, part of his voice box at least, and his eyeballs, right?
Yeah.
So we assume that they're gonna like quadruple amputate
these kids
and take out God knows
just the essentials.
What else?
They're gonna keep just the essentials.
Precisely, and put them into, Grievous's exact same body, except now they're also going to be force powered, and we know that. Look at how the damage Grievous was capable of doing without force powers.
Yeah.
Imagine if he could use the force, and they're going to like train a whole squad of these.
Yeah, there's like 10 or 15
things.
of these kids. So
I kind of wonder if you're that robotic, can you even still use the Force? Like if all you had was your nervous system or your brain.
Yeah, there's like with Vader, his power is always cited as being diminished since he was amputated and everything.
Yeah. But he still has like a body, right?
Yeah, I think other Jedi also add to that sort of lore of being cybernetic. Sort of does hamper your
Lumia.
Yeah. But if you,
it does kind of make sense, like because there are midi-chlorians in every cell,
Yeah.
right? You
And
get your power from the midi-chlorians. So
and
if you lose an arm, you just have less cells with midi-chlorians in them, right?
and
Maybe.
well, I don't know.
Because that's another whole debate. Because metachlorians aren't necessarily.
I mean,
like,
this is totally fanon.
What is this, bro science? No, like
It's fanon science.
yeah. Okay, like the Force, Obi-Wan's definition of the Force, like it moves through all living things, right?
Yeah.
So like if you're not really a living thing or you have no real living components other than your brain, can you actually channel the Force through your body anymore? Like, is that even possible?
Well, I think because you can do like essence transfer, right? Which is like moving your
I guess,
consciousness.
I guess so, yeah.
And here's the thing about essence transfer, though. In the Luke's Jedi Academy, there was a old Imperial battle station or something that Luke got onto, and he found out that there was actually a Jedi consciousness trapped on the computer who did essence transfer. I think it was during the Clone Wars, although that wasn't until after the Clone Wars actually got made.
Yeah.
But anyway, so she put her consciousness onto the computer and then also put her consciousness from the computer into a robot later on.
So was it just her consciousness, or was she actually like wielding the Force in those bodies?
Yeah, I think she could wield the Force once she got. No, she didn't get into a robot body. She got into a human, into a.
She got transferred into a biological.
Into a biological body.
I could understand in biological.
But the point
body.
is, she went bio to digital,
Yeah.
back to bio,
Yeah.
with Force powers. So I feel like if you could maintain yourself within a computer using the Force essence, then you even if you were just your brain within.
We need someone to flesh this out.
Within a robot. What's the I know there's dragoons in StarCraft, right? Which are just sort of this idea.
Or like dreadnoughts in 40K. Yeah.
That's the other one, the dreadnoughts of, just
Yeah.
just the basics that are left over, the tattered biological remains.
Yeah, being wired into a mechanical body or RoboCop.
Doing it on purpose.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I also forgot to mention that when our face tattoo lady was teaching the Padawan how to meditate, so I've been interested in this lately, especially as it pertains to Star Lores. Within sort of yoga tradition, there's these things called mudras, right? Which are like kind of like if you've ever seen the show Naruto, they do these weird hand signs that do these different magic things. So within yoga, there's mudras, and so there are different hand shapes that you're supposed to make based on whatever thing you're meditating about. And so I was wondering if Jedi are ever depicted as using specific mudras, because you can obviously find textbooks and stuff that have them all lined out, and then you can just compare the textbooks to the Star Wars comic books. So I was doing that with her meditation. I was fact checking her. It looks like she's doing the time-honored beer can mudra.
Okay.
I'm making that when she's. It just looks like a beer can. I couldn't find it close
An
enough.
actual word.
It looks like the position you'd make with your hand as you're drinking a beer. That's the mudra. So she was really hoping it was 5 o'clock somewhere during that meditation. Other things. So now we're back to the main meat of the story. So they kidnap these Padawans, and then they take them to Gentees, I guess, which is like a big industrial center. And it's full of Ugnaughts. We get to see Ugnaught, like an Ugnaught military. They kind of look like they're wearing World War II helmets or something. It's kind of fun. But they obviously get like put down pretty quickly by the Confederacy. They take over the planet. But we do get some fun little... They look like little piggies wearing army man helmets.
They're so cute.
They're so cute. It is pretty funny. And so that's sort of where these kids are going to be slowly turned into cyborgs, and they're told, by the way, what's going to happen to them, which is very disturbing. And you get this whole sort of scene with Grievous explaining to them what he's going to do. But we'll get to that later. So the Confederacy sort of takes over all the industry on Gentis and turns it into, obviously, building munitions and helping Grievous and stuff. And I was reminded of one of one of the things he said in the board meeting to the Confederacy during Attack of the Clones, I believe, when he was talking about the free market. I'm like, so this is the free market you were talking about. And then there's like there's a frame of like a battle droid with his blaster pointed at an Ugnaught worker's head. Like, this is the free market, huh, Count Dooku? This is what we were talking about.
Yeah, free to do what they say.
Free to do what you say. What I say.
Free to obey.
Yeah.
Free to
That's
have a
all you're
bigger
free-
gun.
That's all you're free to do.
Free to buy bigger guns than the Confederacy. And that's about it.
Yeah.
So we also sort of learn a little bit more about what Grievous is like as a manager, I guess. I guess we'll say.
Not a general? You wouldn't use the term general for him?
Also general, I suppose. So Grievous has his droids slaughter people for practice, which is interesting. So some of the citizens of Gentis that droids need practice.
Yeah, I was kind of okay.
Something's not adding up.
That's how good. That's how tight a ship Grievous runs.
Even just robots practice.
Even his robots practice on a schedule.
Maybe it's more just like, you know how a car, you have to drive it every now and again to
Yeah.
make sure it doesn't
Make
like,
sure your battle droids
yeah.
are
Actually,
snuff.
They're not getting rusty, you know.
I actually recently
All the
read
fluids are
flushed.
Yeah.
All the lines are flushed.
Exactly.
That's a thing, right? That's a car thing. Actually, I read the book Outbound Flight, which takes place during the Clone Wars, and they actually do mention in there that droids do have to do some, specifically Confederacy droids too.
okay.
There is actually, I don't think they intended it, but there is sort of a lore tie-in where you could justify this. That yes, indeed, it does seem that, or at least this was in the context of the droid fighters, though. So I don't know about the battle droids necessarily.
Yeah, and you could be talking about like levels of programming. You could have
Yeah,
really
that's the
elite, like
thing.
HK type assassin droids that are like
And
always going to be ready to kill, and then like lesser produced, lesser quality droids, right?
Yeah, the Confederacy starfighter ships too. I think they like sort of function on their own complex behavioral network.
Vulture droids.
Yeah, vulture droids. Like they have some sort of. There's maybe some networking things that you have to actually walk them like a dog or something. But anyway, I just thought that was funny. Having droids practice on live people. Could there be anything more useless than target practice on?
Yeah.
Just irony. And then we see a picture of Grievous's lightsaber collection, which is haunting, and we know he's killed hundreds of Jedi, so who knows how big this lightsaber collection is, but it could be very large indeed. I imagine, or I don't know, in that hundreds number, do you think that's like hundreds of Jedis he personally murdered, or just like his army killed? Like,
Yeah, that's actually
collectively?
a fair point. I know he has killed a significant number himself.
We know that all the lightsabers are trophies from kills. So
Yeah.
however many lightsabers we've seen him depicted with, he's killed at least that many Jedi, I think.
Yeah.
I could imagine. I could just see him enjoying the challenge of fighting a Jedi. So
Yeah.
I could see him, like if they engage Jedis, he's the one that goes out to engage them. But that's just
Speculation.
speculation, yeah, on my part.
Curiosity is one of the rare traits that he has left, apparently. So in addition to being anosmic, he can't smell, apparently, because I mean,
He
he
has
mentioned
no olfactory
that
glands.
although the Mon Calamari ship stunk
Smells.
like fish, he couldn't smell. So anyway, I was wondering about that. I'm like, I wonder if Kalish just can't smell, or if he actually lost his sense of smell. Because actually, that's a very common outcome of concussions and strokes, is losing your sense of smell. That can be
And COVID.
and COVID. That's right. Although I think it's rare and
Grievous does have a cough, though. we cannot remove the fact, the
bonneted
possibility.
cough.
Was he wearing his mask?
He's always wearing a mask,
He's always wearing a mask now.
surgically implanted on his face.
Well, look at what happened to David Prowse. Didn't wear his mask.
Oof.
No.
It also makes you wonder too if like the cybernetics make him less of a person, less human, if you will. But I know he's not
Less
human.
Kalish.
Yeah,
Les Khali.
like if he doesn't have any traits, like left, all he has is curiosity. You know,
That
Kinda
is
interesting.
And it's very much like an AI,
Yeah,
like a deep learning machine that we use today. Right?
Yeah,
like
totally.
That's kind of all they do is just curiosity, right? It's
Yeah.
just you just point it in one direction and it just
they
tests
just
and
they
tests
just
and tests.
learn. That's all they do. Yeah.
So yeah, that does give us sort of an idea that we were talking about earlier, how much of Grievous's neurology is affected by the cybernetics, and this is giving us a clue that maybe it's quite a bit.
Yeah.
Because
You could-
maybe he's saying that curiosity is like the only emotion he has left, or
Yeah.
what exactly does he mean by that? Or if it's just an offhand thing.
Yeah, one thing about Grievous too is he has such contradictory depictions, and part of it was because like they released the character before the movie came out, so people didn't know what to expect. Because another thing, like he's often depicted or called out as being a coward. He always runs from combat or when he's losing.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, he challenges Jedi frequently, single-handedly, to take them out personally. You know, like he's supposed to be a brave warlord, but also is a coward at the same time. And
Does
then
he
how
have
can
a-
you be a coward if you feel free? Is he just making a tactical decision and retreating? Or is it out of genuine self-preservation and fear that he retreats, right? Like,
I could see him, like he can probably beat the average Jedi, right? Like that would
he has some significant kills under his belt. And again, it's just
Right, but that's what-
problematic depiction. Like,
That's what I'm saying. It would have to be a very skilled Jedi who would be able to defeat him,
Yeah.
right? So like he's probably not afraid of your average Jedi.
but can he feel fear, first of all?
Well,
Second of
yeah.
all, like in Gennady Tarkovsky's Clone Wars, like he single-handedly, he has his army waiting outside of a crashed Republic starship. He personally goes inside and kills like almost all the Jedi there and grievously injures the other Jedi that are left as survivors. And then he does it again when they attack Coruscant. He personally picks up Palpatine, like single-handedly fights a bunch of Jedi and clone troopers by himself, right? Like that. Those aren't really consistent actions of a coward,
That's true.
right?
Yeah, it's hard to
Or
say.
someone who's not confident in their fighting abilities.
you would think that one of the most basic parts of a brain is like the amygdala, right? So you'd think that fight or flight response
right.
would still be
and maybe
intact.
it's a strict calculation. It's not even a question of bravery or pride. It's I'm losing this fight, time to retreat, to survive, or self-preservation.
Yeah.
Or I'm winning. Like he does a calculation. It's like, okay, I can win this fight. Therefore,
Yeah.
I will engage personally.
Right.
On some level, I don't know, but there is a very there is inconsistent depictions of Grievous across media.
Sure.
And maybe that's how we can rationalize it, is that he's functioning on a more primitive brain, let's
Yeah.
say.
Interesting. Except for the curiosity. I mean,
Well, that's all he has left. Right?
Yeah, I guess
but
that's true.
everything else is fight or flight calculations, right?
Yeah,
Constantly
interesting.
going through his head.
I see what you're saying.
I'm trying to make it work here. Work with me.
That's what fanon's all about, my
Yeah.
friend. So we also get some more detail from Grievous about what he's going to do to all those younglings, the removal of certain redundant organs and amputations. So we do have their plans for these kids if you want to send them to the Confederacy of Independent Schools Charter Academy.
So is Grievous any worse for employing child soldiers?
Then the Republic. Asking the real questions.
Possibly better, because as opposed to the Republic, at least he's sending these child soldiers out to war with some protection, some PPE.
He wants them to stand a chance.
they're gonna
Instead of just
be-
being cannon fodder.
ensconced in Durasteel.
Totally.
Exactly. So I think you're right.
Jordan asking the real questions, the hard questions to the politicians of the Republic.
There's some mention of Probots being sent out, and I just wanted to say that Probot is a Dave Grohl side project that does like heavy metal covers, kind of. Lemmy does a song with them. It's very good.
Oh. There you go.
There's a bunch of random mentions of various genocides that Grievous has ordered. There's some indication that he's wiped out multiple planetary populations by this point in his career. So just putting a cherry on top of he's a very villainous villain. Another great Grievous quote: "I have killed so many of your kind. Forgive me. I have forgotten the one you speak of."
Vader has a very similar quote to it.
Oh, does it?
Yeah. Luke confronts him and he's like, this was before Luke knew who Vader was. And Luke's like, "You killed my father." And Vader's like, "I've killed so many fathers. You'll have to remind me which one."
Oh my God. That is even more bad.
I know, isn't it?
I don't remember that
I
line.
love that line.
I got
It's in one of the comics.
that.
Yeah.
Oh, it's in the comic.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah, you'll have to be more
I killed so many fathers. It's just so
brutal.
I've orphaned a great many children in my time.
But anyways, I'm glad Grievous has a callback line.
So Grievous was just talking to our Padawan from the very beginning of the comic book there, who's trying to avenge his master. They're, on Gentis, which looks a lot like Mustafar. Did this come out after? Just Mustafar in that, like, sort of lava flows and the industry and random droids everywhere.
Yeah.
And, like, you don't really get a big feel for the culture of Gentis other than big factories.
Yeah, and it might just be like not necessarily a homeworld, but like an industrialized world.
Yeah.
Specifically industrialized for a purpose, right? Like almost like Bespin, right? Like the only people that live there are people who are working in the mining industry.
And my final great Grievous line: "Your name will be forgotten, all trace of your existence extinguished." I feel like that almost sounds like a line that was like inspired by a poem or some famous quote or something. I'd like to look in a little bit.
He's also
that.
He was right about that because
No one remembers.
yeah, no one talks about this character. So
And all the Jedi were, of course, killed. Even if he
Yeah.
does survive this, he probably died shortly after this. And of course, Grievous even, he is. Because does Obi-Wan kill Grievous?
Yes.
It's been so long. Yeah. He
Episode
kills him.
3.
Yeah. So anyway,
That galactic menace.
so of course Grievous survives this, and that's sort of the big weakness of this, is it feels like the conclusion almost wasn't a conclusion, like, because Grievous just sort of survives, and yeah, they save the Padawans, but it's like you feel like the Padawans were just tacked on there to make Grievous look more evil.
Yeah.
Like they didn't really.
Yeah.
It doesn't really raise the stakes. I mean, the whole galaxy is the stakes at this point,
Yeah,
right?
so it's like, what's this random group of children?
Just making him more evil.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really intersect with the Padawan story either, because like he already had the motivation. He didn't need to be rescuing a bunch of kids to be motivated.
I think it was to create a conflict at the end where it was like, do we save the kids or do we go continue our mission of revenge?
yeah, it kind of raises the stakes a little bit.
Like on a personal, like while you're there, do I assassinate my target or do I save the kids?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think overall, like the novel, it was it's the strongest point about it is it just has some interesting character building for Grievous. That again you don't get too much of. You kind of understand him in his context a little, and just how he thinks a little more with this. But there's also so this was written in 2005. And I feel like the whole disobeying the Jedi Council to go fight an enemy was done in Knights of the Old Republic.
It's a trope that comes up a few times. Actually.
Yeah.
I mean, even Luke Skywalker going to fight Vader on Bespin
is that
same
Yoda.
thing.
Yeah.
You're not done your training.
Right.
And it's even for the same reason, right? Because Yoda was afraid of the dark side.
Right, yeah.
Which he's always afraid of, with good reason, I guess.
Indeed. Yeah. Yeah. So to me, I kind of like, I don't know. It just seemed a little overplayed, and this did come out around the time of KOTOR 1, just after the KOTOR games. So
Yeah, it's not the strongest story. There's some really great art of Grievous. I think if you're a Grievous fan, you'll be pleased.
Yeah.
It's not like a super plot hole or like hard to follow or anything. There's not many mechanical issues with the story. It's just not super, but it's good.
And it doesn't end abruptly. I was surprised when it ended. I got to the last panel. I was like, I flipped the page expecting more, and it was just done.
Yeah.
I was like, oh.
Yeah,
Okay.
it seems like it's almost more supposed to be just almost like a short story.
Yeah,
right.
and again, it's
and
titled-
short stories are kind of like that. They often end abruptly.
You jump in and you jump out right away.
Yeah.
And it's very much just taking out for a spin the Grievous concept in more further detail than we ever got in the movies.
Yeah.
Like we were only hinted at what we could possibly see with Grievous, and now we actually get it. We learn he's a space racist.
I think
we learn he really cares about children's education.
and perhaps like there is more material on Grievous, but I think what would be more interesting is more of an origin story, you know, and how he became who he.
When I saw the title of the cover, I thought that's what it was.
Yeah, you'd almost think that.
But you know, be that as it may, I enjoyed it still.
Yeah. So what would you think about this fan movie, this alternate script? If like instead of having Darth Maul and then Count Dooku and General Grievous and then leading into Darth Vader, what if you just had like Grievous sort of from the beginning as your Darth Vader stand-in, and then you get that sort of clearer jump, like the final thing is Anakin killing Grievous or whatever, Grievous being destroyed, and then Anakin taking his place. I just sort of building off of that man versus machine theme that sort of runs through both Star Wars trilogies. I think the sequel and the prequels.
Yeah. I don't dislike it. I wouldn't leave the character as strictly Grievous. There'd have to be a more complex backstory. Like, can you amalgamate the characters of Maul, Dooku, and Grievous to be the same thing, right? Like, could Grievous have been a former Jedi or something like more tied in, not strictly transplanting the character of Grievous to overwrite the other characters. Interestingly enough, Maul comes back too half cybernetically as well.
Does.
So kind of like
he also, I noticed this reading this, has the same legs. They've got basically the same robot legs. Maul and Grievous
they
do.
have the claws. Yeah.
I actually think that would, if I were like, okay, doing the prequel trilogy on a blank slate, I probably would do one character. I think it would make a more cohesive story
And a more compelling villain.
Yeah.
Instead of having these throwaway cartoon evil
It
characters.
and it more reflects like what the first trilogy was all about, which is this central hero versus villain.
Yeah.
And you really don't get that as much in the prequel trilogy.
Also, even think of like in episode 1, the scene where Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan fight Maul. If that was Grievous instead, you know, it would have been a lot easier to bring Grievous back because, you know, he easily could have survived getting cut in half and falling down a hole, right? So,
and think about it this way too: Obi-Wan has a lot more incentive to kill Grievous if Grievous is the one that killed his master, right?
Right. Yeah.
And it's that arc is concluded movies later when he finally there's more catharsis with Obi-Wan finally killing Grievous, this menace to the galaxy.
It's also that the fact that Grievous isn't a Sith, right? So
he's like comparable to Jedi in power, but in a way he's the total opposite. Right?
Yeah. I like Maul has to hide beneath the shadows because they can't reveal to the Jedi Order that the Sith are back, right?
Yeah.
But Grievous wouldn't really. Grievous in the actual story, he would have already been a contemporary of them during episode 1, right?
Yeah.
So,
and he wouldn't have that incentive to hide. He could be an out and open general of armies and like a warlord, right?
Precisely. I actually kind of think if I were writing this, I would probably go with it does make more sense to go with Grievous. And I can't remember where I was reading. I feel like we covered this on a recent podcast, but perhaps Lucas was supposed to, there was like too many villains, like between Maul and Dooku and Grievous. It was getting like they didn't even get that much screen time between the three of those villains, right? So it kind of would have made more sense to just build a more in-depth story on one rather than have like these three. However, but with that being said, I like all three of those characters.
Yeah.
Me too. Dooku's
I don't
awesome.
necessarily.
Maul's awesome.
Yeah, I don't necessarily want them to
Disappear.
Yeah, be a retcon from the story, but just thinking from a like pure story writing perspective.
That's what I was thinking. There are some elements of the Dooku thing that I think would have worked, or at least would have been more like homologous with the original trilogy, and it would have also been interesting to have such a villain not have the Force, as we're saying.
I agree. Yeah,
that's really cool because the Force is sort of this idea about life and beauty and being all natural,
right?
And then you have that sort of anti-corporate stance, anti-technocrat stance, generally of Star Wars being perfectly represented in that he's the opposite of the Jedi. Because when you have two ideologies that sort of hate each other, like the Jedi and the Sith, right? You kind of have a sense that they're really the same at the end of the day. They're doing the same kind of things. Like it's that old trope of you have to love something to hate it. But and hate's not really that scary.
Yeah.
Because of that. But what's really scary is indifference, like the indifference of machines that just mow things down and don't have emotions or feelings and are just trying to reproduce themselves or have the free market, like get what Dooku wants.
Yeah,
that kind of at the blaster point of a battle droid free market.
Yeah.
Anyway.
It also would have just been probably a better tie-in with like the Trade Federation and
exactly
all the robotics.
He's much
stuff.
more of an avatar of the what the Trade Federation stands for.
Yeah. But anyways,
not that I'm not unsatisfied with with Dooku or Maul.
Yeah.
But I do want somebody to make that fan film of
just to see what it would have been like.
Just cut Count Dooku into every Jar Jar Binks scene or something. That would be great.
Yes. A cool little fun fact too with Grievous is DiMaggio, John DiMaggio, does his voice in Tarkovsky's Clone Wars.
Okay.
And he's Bender from Futurama.
Really?
And Marcus Phoenix and a bunch of other. He's a pretty prominent voice actor, but
that's awesome.
I love the Bender connection that Bender is General Grievous. So much makes sense.
That's two Futurama references in one episode. It's good.
I can't remember if it's Tarkovsky's Grievous or maybe the newer Clone Wars Grievous, but I find that hard to believe because Tarkovsky's Grievous came out before the movie, so they didn't even know what Grievous was actually going to sound like prior to the release of Episode 3.
We hardly even talked about his distinctive voice, but
yes,
I mean we talked a little bit. But do you guys want to do a Grievous
impression?
No,
not particularly.
No, not really.
Yeah, me neither.
And then another quick little side note: Marvel Comics. So now that they've reacquired Star Wars, they're re-releasing new things tied into like the Republic era and other eras.
I know I got very confused a couple times in Cyborgs because I kept accidentally linking back to a canon source for Grievous, and I kept writing it halfway and then realizing I was using canon,
the wrong material.
It was a big mess.
Yeah, I was that
because his Disney backstory is quite extensive. So
yeah,
I imagine it differs quite a lot.
So it doesn't.
Really?
That's the surprising thing is that they kept his species, they kept his alien race. One of the big changes.
See, that actually that's a point against them as far as I'm concerned. Because it's like
you had a clean
do something
slate.
else.
You
have a clean slate. Just do something else.
They kept his former alien name, and the interesting thing is like Disney could have done anything that's not explicitly mentioned in the movie for Grievous. They could have rewritten anything in his backstory, right? These things were not like his alien origins and all that were not explicitly stated in the movie, so it was fair game for Star Wars to rewrite, and they didn't, which is interesting. One thing that is a significant departure is that Grievous is like constantly upgrading himself and like almost intentionally like
Yeah, he's much more of a post-human, right?
Yeah, and like looking for that like the perfection
Yeah.
of form kind of mentality where like he wants to be the ultimate warrior and keeps like improving his body and all that stuff. And
Oh, so he's a member of the transhuman movement.
no, trans-Kali
Or
movement. But yeah, it was just an interesting departure. Like it's almost like he willingly underwent the surgeries. I don't know about the initial surgeries, but moving forward, he definitely like has progressively become more and more robotic on purpose because he wants to be. Versus this Grievous is more of a tragic character, where he, you know, was this warlord. He was in an accident. People took advantage of him and made him into the thing that he became. Right? It's not. He didn't really choose that fate.
And the Confederacy, they didn't cover it in this graphic novel, but they leveraged something about Kali. Like, why the hatred of Jedi? Also, like, because he wasn't at war with the Jedi on Kali or anything.
He did.
Was
There
he?
was. He didn't like the Republic, and I believe the Jedi would have been involved in some kind of peace action, if I'm not mistaken. I'll have to dig into it. We'll maybe do a Grievous specific episode and talk about
Oh yeah.
his whole history. But I believe the Republic had interfered in his world before. Hence, yeah, the specific hatred of Jedi.
All right. Anything else about General Grievous? You sending in your kids' applications to the Confederacy
I want them to
Waldorf
have
School?
a better life. Yeah.
Sounds good. May the Force be with you.